afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Pulomim, for inviting me to chair this third session of this seminar series. Today, the session will focus on animals in food systems. Before we begin, I would like to let you know the structure of the seminar. We have two speakers, and each will present for about 30 minutes, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions or any comments, you can use the chat to submit them, and I will address them at the end during the Q&A, okay? And I also have to ask to please keep your microphones muted during the presentations. As Pulomi said, today we have two great speakers. First, we will hear from Julia Castellano, a PhD candidate at Universitat Pompeu Fabra. And afterwards, we will have Dr. Richard Twine, who will join us shortly. So now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Julia Castellano. Julia is a Spanish PhD candidate in the Department of Communication at Universitat Pompeu Fabra and a member of the Critique Research Group at the UPF Center for Animal Ethics. Her research focuses on vegan studies, particularly on strategic communication for vegan brands and political consumerism. Her presentation, Seed for Change, Communication Tactics for Ethical Food Systems, examines the communication strategies of vegan product brands. Julia, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bedlem, and everyone for having me here and being here in this session. You can hear me well? Perfect. I will try to share now the presentation. Okay. Do you see the presentation also? Wait, now. Okay. Perfect. So as Belém said, my presentation is Seeds of Change, Communication Tactics for Ethical Food Systems. And well, this is part of my ongoing doctoral thesis. I will briefly explain that my thesis starts from the idea that the current Western food system is problematic for many reasons, but especially because of the use of animal-based foods that are the most problematic of all because of the ecological pressure they have, the impact on human health, and of course, the impact they have on non-human animals. And my assumption when starting this thesis is that given these disastrous consequences, in the coming years, governments and institutions will have to start implementing campaigns to promote the transition towards plant-based protein. Okay, this is an assumption, maybe optimistic, but the thing is, my question when I start is, okay, then if governments will start to do this, if they haven't started yet, which way is the best way to do it? This is the main question that guided my thesis through these years, and now I'm in my final year. I believe that this is a question very important because we don't have much time, and we shouldn't spend a lot of time doing it because, of course, as we know, every day that we're still in this system, many millions of non-human animals are being slaughtered. And also, I believe that it's a question that we have to do it quickly, but we also have to do it well. Like when we do it, the cost of doing a bad campaign, if we have to start promoting to the population the transition towards a plant-based diet, if we do it wrong, like if we don't have a clear strategy on how to do it, the cost is huge. Therefore, I said, or I thought, okay, we have a lot of knowledge. If someone asked me now, like, okay, how do we do it? In my town, in my city, in my country, we have to promote this. We have to promote the transition towards a plant-based diet. How do we do it? We have a lot of knowledge that is theoretical on the reasons on why we should do that. For me, this is very clear. We also have some empirical knowledge on how to make a behavioral change from psychology mostly. Like, what do you do when you need someone to change their behavior? Okay, we also have a lot of knowledge on that. And of course, animal activists have been doing this for years, trying to convince people to make this transition and to stop using animals. So we already have a lot of knowledge, but I thought that there was an actor that could be an opportunity for research, and these actors are plant-based alternative food brands. So these are companies that are making products that look taste, and are used in the same way as animal products, but that are made from plants. These, of course, are very new companies, not the ones that are making plant-based foods, because this has always existed, but the ones that are trying to imitate animal products. And I believe that we knew little about them, and that it was interesting to see what are they doing, because these brands are already investing a lot of money and time trying to convince people to buy their products. So trying to convince people to buy plant-based instead of animal-based products. So I thought that it was an opportunity to see what are they doing and see if we can learn something from them. The methodology for my thesis was inspired by the work of Carrie Freeman in Framing Farming, where she analyzed the advocacy material of the main US animal rights organizations. And in my thesis, I analyzed the marketing material of the main plant-based brands in Spain. She also did interviews with its leaders, and I've been doing interviews with some of the CEOs or some of the people in charge of communication of these brands, and with the same idea, that analyzing the representation that they are doing of these products, and also how they are producing this rhetoric and this narrative. So what I've done is analyze the Instagram post, because Instagram is the main social network used by the brands to communicate to their consumers, followers, or to the people. And I've been analyzing the posts of the main companies in Spain. I have Eura as the biggest one. Eura, if you don't know it, makes plant-based meat and plant-based fish. Also, Yo Soy. It's a Catalan brand, but it sells to all Spain. Yo Soy, it's also a Catalan brand that makes plant-based beverages. And then I have 4 plant-based cheese brands. Vaca, Veggie Karma, Fermento Vegano are also Catalan, and Momus is from Valencia. And 3 companies, Wobo, also from Catalonia, that makes plant-based egg. Give Me Sabor, that makes spices that taste like animal products, that it's from the south of Spain. Actually, it's from Murcia. And Current Foods, that it was also co-founded in Barcelona, and that made plant-based fish. So this was my sample. In total, it's 392,000 followers that they have on Instagram, and more than the half of it's from Eura. Therefore, in my thesis, I talk about all the companies, and I have interviews with all of them, but you will see that for these presentations, I will mainly focus on Eura, because it's the biggest one and one of the most important, if not the most important, plant-based brand in Spain. So for Eura, and for the results I will be showing today, I have more than 2,000 Instagram posts analyzed, and I followed a grounded theory approach. Therefore, I started coding the post without previous categories, and I started making research questions as I was coding them. Okay, so you will see that from one question, then another pops up, and I'm still a little bit on that process. Okay, so I did this thesis, as I said, because I thought that these brands were already asking people to change their behavior, to start consuming animal-based, plant-based products. But this could be only an assumption, like maybe it wasn't true. So first I had to check if these brands were actually asking for a change, if they were making change petitions. So in a sample of 200 posts from Eura, I tried to see what changes are they asking for, if any, because maybe they were just selling their products without asking for any change. So these are the main changes that they're asking to their consumers, followers, people. The first one is to switch to a plant-based diet. So first here we see that, well, actually this brand, at least Eura, is asking people to make a change. And this is the main one, asking them to switch to a plant-based diet. They do that with posts, for example, like this one, where they compare the cost of making an animal-based burger or a plant-based burger. So of course here they're not making a specific petition of stop eating meat, but it's implicit that by comparing and showing the differences and showing the real cost of meat, they're saying change to the plant-based option. They are also making petitions to change the food system as a whole. This is another example where they, for example, ask for or play with the idea of having an environment score on products instead of a nutritional score. And sometimes they're more specific, like in this case, which is a campaign for when they launched plant-based fish, where they specifically said change the food system. In this case, because industrial fishing catches 5 million fish every minute. And they also make specific petitions about stop eating animals, or stop consuming them. For example, in this post, animals are not products. They try to promote a new model that leaves, they usually say that they want to leave animals out of the equation. Or, for example, when they specifically talk about how they were created to help end the abuse and mistreatment of animals in the food system. So they're not afraid of talking about animals and their suffering. Another petition that they make in their post, the fourth one, is to change the world. And this is very aligned with the EURA's strategy to be very global and to say, look, our mission is not to sell plant-based meat, but to be part of a movement much larger than ourselves. And they talk a lot about changing the world for the animals, but also for the people, for the planet, for human health. They try to have a holistic strategy. So the first thing that I had to check is if they were asking petitions, and then I also analyzed the other brands, and in general, all of them in at least half of the post, with it's a lot for an Instagram account that in the end is the account of a company. They are making change petitions, and more or less they are all the same. They all have the same categories, except for some that EURA, for example, doesn't have, but they are pretty similar. Now that I knew that they are actually making change petitions, it makes sense to see, okay, they are really willing or saying their audience that something has to change. How are they framing this message? And here, this is the results for the frame analysis of EURA. And the main frame that they used is recipes and community, and this is common for all the other brands, but it makes sense because we're talking about Instagram. So it makes sense that the main frame that they use is talking about food and how to cook food and share photos of food, etc. So this is something very related to the platform itself, and also community, because what you want on Instagram, if you're a brand, is try to get some followers. But what I found is that, well, we have the main frames that we all know. The ones related to recipes could be the ones that relate to taste, and we all enjoy having tasty food. The one related to sustainability, health, and they also talked about non-human animals and the ethical frame. But for me, what was interesting, besides these frames of community that are common in all brands in Instagram, and this part of entrepreneurism, like we are a small startup, and where they explain how they went from an idea to a big company, is that they have these frames that here for me, since I created the categories, I created different names for them, but they could all fit into one big frame, and then it would be the most used one. But it's vision, revolution, and challenge the status quo. When I talk about vision, for me, it was very interesting and fascinating, and to see how EURA makes a lot of posts where they put the plant-based diet as the logical outcome or the logical path that we have to do, like the future. So, for example, they make posts like this one where they say, we used to have analogical cameras, now we have digital cameras. We used to have blockbusters, Netflix. We used to eat meat, and now we will use plant-based. We will eat plant-based. Okay, so they create like a vision, like this is the future. The future is like this, and help their followers to envision this future where we are not consuming animal products. And the category challenges status quo. For me, it's different than vision, because this is where they show that they are enacting this future now, like in the present. For example, in this post, this is a traditional shop in Barcelona where usually they sell meat, and they were able to put EURA there. So this was a challenge to the status quo and to the idea that, okay, we have always been doing something. In this case, this is a traditional shop that usually sells meat. But now this future that we have in the vision, it's also in the present. Like, it's now different. We're challenging the way that things are. And now you can find Eura and plant-based meat in your traditional shop. Or for example, when they introduce their new product in a bullfighting plaza. In Catalonia, bullfighting is forbidden, and I don't know in the rest of Spain, but on many areas of Spain, it's still something that happens. But it was this idea of, okay, it's not the future, it's now. A place that was used for animal torture, now it's a place that we use to introduce plant-based products. And finally, the revolution frame. They talked a lot about revolution. They even had a post with the word revolution, explaining that it's a radical change, profound and permanent in regards to the status quo. And they have this rhetoric and this frame of, okay, this is something that we do together, something that we can do together as a community, join the revolution, join the movement. So they frame it more like something that we do together as many people in different places doing something instead of personal choice, for example. So far, my idea was, okay, let's see what the companies have to offer. I analyzed what they do. I found that they actually asking for changes and that they have these specific frames that I believe could be useful if we had to implement institutional campaigns. Why I believe this is very important. Because you could say, okay, this vision challenges status quo and revolution. This is something that activists are already doing. Like, this is what activists mainly do. So why is it important if brands do it? Well, I believe it's important because brands are in a different scenario and have a different position as actors than activists do. And I believe that strategically this is very important because if you're not vegan and you see an activist debate with a brand that sells meat, you can argue, or it could be difficult to see like the similarity and say, okay, yeah, but you're doing this because you're an activist. And now it's an actor that it's kind of in the same scenario. Like, they're also a brand, they're also in this capitalistic game, therefore they also care about money and making profits, etc. So they can use kind of the same rhetoric, but say, okay, we are also a brand, we're also profiting from this, but we're doing differently. We're doing it without the animals. So I believe that it's very important that they have this space and they are using these frames. But most important even, it's not that they can challenge the discourse or narratives of the meat industry, but that they can challenge the narratives of the plant-based industry that is not vegan. So for example, I'm assuming that in every country, but in Spain, we have brands that sell plant-based products but are owned by meat companies or milk companies. So for example, Better Balance makes plant-based products, but is owned by a company that makes that exploits other animals. And I believe that this is the interesting role that these brands that are vegan or non-speciesist at core can play. And it's challenging the discourses of these other brands. Because, to give some perspective and to understand why this is important, these are the 4 most used words in Neura's post. Okay, and I did word frequencies analysis on all their posts, and the most used is planet, then plant-based, animal, and meat. Okay, when I saw that, okay, they mentioned the other animals, let's see how are they doing it, because mentioning animal by itself, it's not relevant. So I did an analysis of the 687 posts where they mentioned the word animal, and I saw that they're talking about other animals to talk about sustainability, to talk about not consuming them, to talk about human health. But what I believe is important is that they are also talking about compassion towards other animals, political solutions that include other animals, their exploitation, the animal industrial complex, non-human animals in themselves, like maybe their characteristics, and also to talk about ethics. And when I compare the big 4 arguments for transitioning towards a plant-based diet, like doing it for the animals, doing it for the taste, health, or sustainability, I find that all the brands that I analyzed, that remember are brands that are owned by vegan people, and that in their goal they promote the vegan values. They're not brands owned by meat factories or milk factories. They all talk about animals. And I believe that this is the most important lesson that we can learn from these brands if we have to create institutional campaigns, that we cannot leave the animals out of the narrative. And I understand, and you can see it here, that when you're a brand, you have to do a strategy on Instagram, you have to be strategic. So for example, Wowo is the one that makes plant-based egg, doesn't talk too much about health because maybe the health benefits of the product are not the best that they can sell, because yeah, they might be healthier than animal eggs in some things, but maybe not healthier than animal eggs in others. So therefore they don't focus on health, and they focus a lot on the animals, because for them it's very important to see, okay, maybe our product doesn't taste like egg and it's not as healthy as animal egg, but look what happens. We are leaving out of the equation and avoiding the suffering of many animals. On the other hand, for example, Yosoi that makes plant-based milks, they know that a lot of people eat plant-based, drink plant-based milks because of health reasons. Therefore, they focus their strategy on health. Give Me Sabor, if they are making products that taste like animal products, they're focusing their strategy on taste. But even in this case, they do not forget to talk about other animals. And I believe that this is very important. Because, and this is to finish, why is this important? Why is it so important that we do not leave animals out of the equation? Because what is the alternative? The alternative is having plant-based products, because even if it's for selfish reasons, it's very unlikely that we do not transition towards a plant-based diet, because it's not sustainable to have an animal-based diet. But if we let non-vegan brands to direct the narratives, what happens is this, that we have, for example, Better Balance. First post that I analyzed of Better Balance, because I wanted to say, okay, let's do a comparative analysis and see what are the others doing. So the first thing that they do on their post is talk about the way to a better life and use the hashtag lifestyle. For me, this was shocking, because after analyzing so many posts from all the vegan brands, I've never saw the hashtag lifestyle. In Eura, it has never been used, because they do not see veganism or eating plant-based as a lifestyle choice, but something more political, ethical, more structural. Therefore, this was the first red flag for me to think, okay, first post, and they're talking about lifestyle, talking about being healthy and tasty, of course. Then we have this post of it's better for you, better for everyone, no? And this product is for flexitarians, vegetarians, vegans, and carnivores. If carnivores exist, because I don't know if human carnivores can be possible, but this is their message. Like, what they're saying, if we let these brands, that we have to take into account that these brands are the ones that have more access to big supermarkets, that their products are cheaper, and that they have more money because they're from big companies to spend on communication. The narrative is this one, like, we're not like these elitist vegan brands that only vegans can eat. We are for everyone. And this is a problem because, of course, for example, here we have a post where they say we were the only brand plant-based on the event, on a fair. And actually I went to a music festival, and they were the only plant-based brand that you could eat. So if you wanted to eat something vegan, you had to buy from them. And they have these opportunities that smaller and maybe more ethical plant-based brands don't have. And what's the problem with this? What represents this for other animals? So in the 326 posts that they have, I wanted to count also how many times did they mention the word animal, and the answer was 0. Okay, so in all their communication, not once they mentioned the word animal. And this it's kind of similar with other brands that have the same problem. For example, Vive Soy, also plant-based beverages owned by a company that makes animal milk, sells a cow's milk, okay? In the sample of more than almost 2,000 posts, they only mention the word animal 5 times. And since it's only 5 times, I can show you how they use it. The first time was to talk about how the presence of dogs has countless benefits for us. The second one also to talk about pets. The third one to talk about Mother Nature, pure air, little animals, and delicious almond milk. I don't know, but we can see how this narrative is very different from the one used from the other brands. The fourth one was this strange image and how we all need to be cared for every day, people, animals, and plants. And the last one was to talk about animal print. Okay, so this is the alternative. And as I said, Vive Soy is probably the one that sells most plant-based milks, the one that has more money for communication, the one that you can see on TV, the one that you can see in more advertisements. And if we don't have the alternative plant-based brands with their presence on social media, this is what's left. This is what veganism is reduced to. And for example, if you check on their website, Pascual, no? Pascual is the milk factory that is making this vegan brand now. Why are they doing it? Of course, they're doing it to respond to the growing demand for plant-based drinks. And they explain that this growth is driven by the taste and enjoyment of consumers. So of course, it's not for ethical reasons or sustainability or not even health, like it's just taste and enjoyment. So they are controlling and changing the narratives of why people are doing this. And it's very interesting if we compare it with one of the first posts of Eura, where they say, okay, we exist to advocate for a new way of consuming that takes into account animals and the planet, food justice, our health, and includes values that we all share. And finally, I wanted also, for me, this was very shocking because in all the interviews that I did with these vegan brands, especially the ones that make cheese, they all had problems, legal problems because of the name. They because of these amendments that now are no longer, they were banned, not approved, but they had problems at their moment because they were worried that, okay, then we have to change the name of our product. We cannot use terms such as milk, cream, butter, cheese, etc. And they all had sanctions because of that. And they were in legal procedures, and it was very costly for them. And especially the ones that make cheese are small companies, female-owned, very local. They do it manually. Even if they are the biggest one in Spain, it's still something very, very small. And for them, this was crushing, like to have to face this against a lobby that is denouncing them or, doing this to them. And what shocked me is that they had to be very creative to go over this ban. Okay, so they all came together, all the brands. I could see it when I was analyzing the post, how they would mention all together and how they were asking people to stop these amendments. They were trying to get people to sign, and they had to do things like, for example, name their product like, this is not cheese. For example, this is something that has been very common. And here, for example, another owner of a cheese brand had to make a benefic event to collect money because for them it was impossible to assume the cost of the legal things that they had to do. And she even played music herself to collect the money. Okay, so this was the experience that I was listening or hearing on the interviews. And then I found that these brands that are owned by animal companies, companies that make that sell animal products, also use this rhetoric. And suddenly we have this new brand owned by Pascual that makes animal milk that says mimic. It's not milk. And they copy, and you can see, for example, in their bio on Instagram, this narrative trying to copy the struggles of vegan brands. So for example, here, this would give, I could be a lot of time analyzing this, but how they say, okay, the world is going downhill, trying to present like, okay, we are part of these people that have this feeling that we need something to change, etc. No? At least you have milk. The wow texture for me, it was very similar to the, or remind me a lot about the slogan of Oatly. That's probably the most famous plant-based brand that says, "Whoa, no cow." And finally saying things like obviously 100% plant-based. No, for me it's practically they're disrespecting the consumers because they're making it seem like obviously like it's not possible to do it another way, while there are companies that are selling animal products. So here I have a lot of examples of these companies that are the ones that make that real vegan companies have to struggle and be creative and find ways to go around what the lobby is trying, that the animal lobby is trying to do to them, and now they do the same rhetoric and try to co-opt this. They are using, therefore, the language of resistance as a marketing tool, commodifying the very act of rebellion, co-opting the creative strategies of smaller, non-specious brands, and then transforming these narratives that I believe are what they have, that it's powerful, and here it just seems like a mockery of the consumer. In Alpro, it's the same. The only time they mention animal is to refer to something wild or something fair, not to talk about other animals. And yeah, just to finish, because I had a lot of slides, I wanted to finish with this idea that what these brands have and that we can learn from them is that animals, non-human animals, should never be taken away from the narrative, and that I believe that these brands have an utopian discourse because first they are rejecting the existing society. So in their communication campaigns, they're saying, okay, we're challenging this. And they also have this vision of what's the alternative. And they are creating an utopian practice because they are creating here and now some of the features of this utopian future. Like, of course, the future is not only, not all the problems that non-human animals face are related to the food system, but these brands at least are creating some parts of this future. And well, here I will finish. I hope that you found this interesting, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Julia, for such an interesting presentation. Now, let me introduce our second speaker, Dr. Richard Twine, who is a reader in sociology and the co-director of the Centre for Human-Animal Studies at Edge Hill University in the UK. Richard is a leading scholar in critical animal studies and sociology, and as many of you know, he has authored numerous works, including the recent the climate crisis and other animals, the rise of critical animal studies from the margins to the center, and animals as biotechnology, ethics, sustainability, and critical animal studies. Recently, he also co-edited Violence and Harm in the Animal Industrial Complex, Human-Animal Entanglement. His presentation today, entitled Crafting an Alternative Dublin Declaration, critiques the 2023 Dublin Declaration and proposes alternative frameworks for ecological public health and multi-species justice. Richard, whenever you're ready, please take the floor.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me and also see my presentation? Great. Thanks for the thumbs up. And thank you so much to the organizers. You're doing a great job with this seminar series for UCD and for everybody else. And thanks for inviting me to be part of it. Okay. So yeah, my talk is titled Crafting an Alternative Dublin Declaration, but I'm going to spend most of my time outlining some recent critique that I've been part of the Dublin Declaration. And at the end, I will get to an alternative view. So yeah, the aim of my talk is to really outline how pushback from the meat industry interests are trying to thwart transformational institutional change towards plant-based diets. And there are, of course, many examples of this, but the Dublin Declaration is perhaps one of the most audible and culturally visible, perhaps. And then, yes, at the end, I'll outline what an alternative declaration and imaginary could look like. So I'm talking to two publications that have come out this very month, actually. Thanks for the mention of the recent book. So this just like came out 2 weeks ago, and I just got my hands on this copy like last week. And I should also mention that Yulia has a chapter in this too. So it's very apt that we're speaking together in this event. And so I co-edit that with Gwen Honeycutt and Kenneth Mentor, who are both US academics familiar in the fields of gender-based violence and criminology, for example. And then this other publication, which also came out this month in the journal Environmental Science and Policy, my team there of various interesting people. I think you might have heard of some of these people before. We have this published, the Dublin Declaration, Gain for the Meat Industry, Loss for Science. And yeah, a lot of hard work went into that. Okay, so if you want to find out more after I've spoken, then these are the two publications to go for. And the journal article is open access, and I'm sure I can send you a PDF of my book chapter. Okay, so a little bit of background. I got my PhD in 2002, and then I was a researcher at Lancaster University initially, and I was doing research into biotechnology and specifically animal biotechnology. And in 2005/2006, I interviewed a cross-section of UK animal scientists. We could also say meat scientists at the famous Roslin Institute and the Scottish Agricultural College, both situated nearby in near Edinburgh. And I was really interested to understand how genomic knowledge was being applied by meat scientists. So that they'd been sequencing animals used in animal agriculture, and basically they were interested in how this genomic knowledge could be used to make animal agriculture more productive and profitable. But of course, I did discover that the animal science community is not homogeneous. It is dominated by so-called livestock production scientists or meat scientists, but it also includes welfare scientists as well, who are kind of struggling to be heard amongst struggling alongside their kind of more productionist colleagues. So that was hard to believe, but nearly 20 years ago. In the meantime, I've also helped theorize the concept of the animal industrial complex. I took Barbara Noska's concept and tried to develop it further, and other people have been important in that endeavor too, like David Nybert and others. So it's often now used by sociologists and criminologists to understand the institutionalized character of animal exploitation. And I certainly don't just mean the term to be used in terms of agriculture, but I mean it across all different kinds of animal exploitation. It's just that I tend to focus on the agricultural side, but in this book it's a lot more broader than the agricultural side. So now, like, trying to understand attempts at pushback and protectionism help us better to understand how the animal industrial complex operates to secure business as usual, to deflect attempts to transform the food system. So this is how this current work fits in with my work on the animal industrial complex. And yeah, okay, this is the last book I'll wave. So thanks for the mention of this book. This came out earlier this year, back in April, The Climate Crisis and Other Animals. And if you want to know more about my theorization of the animal industrial complex, that's also in that book. Okay. And also in that book is this diagram is basically my imagination of what the animal industrial complex looks like in terms of animal agriculture. And this is also inflected with my interest in practice theory, which I guess contra the mention in the previous talk about psychological theories of behavior change, practice theory is kind of in opposition to those, really. It's a sociological understanding of practices and how we might be able to understand how practices change sociologically in a different way, in a different tradition to the sort of more psychological theories of behavior change. So I won't go into this in massive detail right now, but it's in the book. It's also reproduced in the book chapter in the new book. And I will basically refer to, if you look at the box corporations and associations, and if you follow that out, I've got lobbying included within that. So that kind of forms part of the animal industrial complex as I'm understanding it. Okay, so we'll leave that for now. So why are we seeing pushback now from interests of the animal industry? Well, first of all, we can say that there's a measure of success going on, relative, of course. Plant-based diets have achieved a certain cultural presence. And maybe, and I don't want to over-exaggerate this, but the profits and jobs of the animal industrial complex are potentially under threat. It's an incredibly profitable part of capitalism. And we can understand, just like with the fossil fuel industry, they are trying to protect this profitability. Also, on a more philosophical level, anthropocentric ideology is under threat. So by this, I don't just mean literally human-centeredness. I'm drawing upon the more extensive definition of anthropocentrism offered by people like Matthew Calarco. That's the particular definition that I draw upon in my climate crisis book. I won't go into that now, but that's what I'm meaning. Also, pushback, I think, is happening because nutrition is inherently political, because it is a consequence for how we understand what it means to be human. And whenever there's a kind of contest over that, lots of different stakeholders become interested because people have different investments over different ideas of what it means to be human. And also, I think in the last few decades, the scientific evidence base for plant-based diets has expanded. We know more about the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. And we also understand the broad co-benefits in terms of its environmental impact and potentially other impacts as well related to pandemic risks and other things like that. All these bubbles on the right-hand side refer to some databases I produced for my climate crisis book, and they include 21 studies demonstrating that a plant-based diet can be the lowest emissions diet. Like, I couldn't find any studies arguing that a meat-based diet is the lowest emissions diet. And these all range between 2009 and 2023 in their publication date, and they're in reputable peer-reviewed journals. And then I also had two other databases. I've just amalgamated them in this sentence, but 100 peer-reviewed articles or reports. So it's basically 50-50, 50 peer-reviewed articles and 50 reports, roughly, recommending reductions in animal consumption for climate mitigation and other co-benefits 2003 to 2022. And the peer-reviewed articles, the 50 or so peer-reviewed articles, they're all in sort of reputable, respected journals. Okay, so I think that's a quite compelling evidence base, which the authors of the Dublin Declaration ignored. Okay. So what was the Dublin Declaration? So there was a conference that took place in October 2022, and this was a gathering of animal scientists / meat scientists, and they produced the declaration, which has been signed by over 1,000 people. And they also published in a special issue of a journal called Animal Frontiers, which I'll say more about in a moment. That was in April 2023. And they published a short correspondence piece in the journal Nature Food in June 2023 that you can see at the bottom in the middle of your screen. And they've also been involved in a broader campaign of lobbying on social media, and also lobbying important bodies like the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. And they have a particular framing within their declaration that the emphasis on meats, they have an emphasis on meat's societal role, its evolutionary role, what they see as its contribution to human health, and they don't think its environmental impact is actually that large. So they downplay the adverse impacts of the animal industrial complex. And they say there's no need to cut down to be green, keep eating meat to be healthy. And they refer, perhaps not in the declaration itself, but in their wider social media presence, they refer to people who are vegan or even reducing as kind of ideologists or zealots. And of course, they somehow don't see themselves as ideologues, which is really interesting. And just to mention, yeah, I said, so they published a special issue in the Animal Frontiers. This is a journal which is actually an industry journal. It's funded by these 4 associations: the American Society of Animal Science, American Meat Science Association, World Association for Animal Production, and the European Federation of Animal Science. And yeah, we think that compromises its particular objectivity. It's funded by industry, and it's the whole meat science area is a really interesting area of science that I'm surprised not more sociologists of science have actually delved into it. I did in my very first book back in 2010, and this work now has kind of revived that interest for me. And they say really interesting things, which I think are very contestable. So here's that kind of screenshot of the piece that they managed to have published in Nature Food, and we in our recent journal article we picked out this really curious sentence that they have in that correspondence, which apparently Nature Food didn't want to pick up on in terms of peer reviewing the correspondence. They said it's the ethical reality that the animal needs to give its life in favor of the human species. So this kind of like very uncritical anthropocentric view, which is kind of ignoring the way in which food systems are historical and political and so on. Okay, so you can see the Dublin Declaration on their website, and you can also see there's the list of latest signatures. I think it's still open for signing, I think, but it's kind of seems it's sort of stabilized at sort of just around 1,100 signatories. And so what I've done as part of my analysis of it is to kind of look at, well, who are the signatories of this declaration? Well, they're overwhelmingly made up of the global meat, dairy, egg science community, essentially the animal production scientists, people like geneticists, veterinarians, and has quite a narrow disciplinary profile. So these are the community of scientists that have enabled the industrialization of animal production historically throughout the 20th century. So these bodies of science developed rapidly in the 20th century, especially post Second World War. Meat scientists, they are often indistinguishable from industry. There's a lot of academic/industry mobility in terms of careers. Research aims are often about maximizing profitability. So even like the genetic research talks about how we can make genetic progress through different sort of decisions around what kind of genotypes are the best to select for and this kind of thing. Not surprisingly, the field assumes anthropocentric social norms. Okay, I was interested as to whether the list of signatories included any sort of nutritionists or dietitians, and what I found was that it included hardly any. It included some people that I think it's fair to describe as controversial figures. So I pick out 3 here, for example, Bradley Johnston, Trudy Deacon, and Carrie Ruxton, who have all sort of been the center of controversy around different claims. So here you've got a feature about Bradley Johnston. Scientists who discredited meat guidelines didn't report past food industry ties. So he didn't report his links. And then you've got Trudy Deacon arguing that a high-fat diet is a healthy diet, which I'm not a dietitian, but I believe this goes against common knowledge in the field of nutrition and dietetics. So, and then yeah, then you've got Carrie Ruxton on the right-hand side at the center of a conflict of interest row over being a part of the food standards board member in Scotland, my home country. Okay. And then I looked at, so where are the signatories coming from, the country locations of signatories of the Dublin Declaration. And we see as follows. So we've got the highest representation from the United States, and then Spain. Julia, are you listening? Italy, France, Australia, Brazil, Germany, UK, Portugal, Belgium, Argentina, Ireland. And if you know anything about the global meat economy, you will recognize that these are countries with high meat consumption, also exports, and also fairly wealthy countries as well. So the first point I make is that these are meat cultures protecting their own interests, right? And these are I'm not denying that these are scientists, but they're a special breed of scientists who are very much entangled with industry. Then I looked at the affiliations of signatories by country where there were more than 10 signatories. So here I'm looking at different like research institutions. This is what I mean by affiliations, whether they're from a particular university or a particular research institution. And I found that, for example, in Australia, there was obviously certain universities which are meat science strongholds, and the same for Italy. And you can see that France, Spain, Brazil, Ireland, Chagas, which we'll come back to shortly. And yeah, it's actually really useful research tool. The list of signatories itself becomes a useful research tool for understanding the spatialities of the global meat science infrastructure. So we plotted, and this is my individual chapter, but I had help from a friend researcher based in Japan, and he helped me put together these plots. And so figure 3 on the top left shows the relationship between number of signees and national GDP, simply making the point that there seems to be a relationship between the wealth of countries and the number of signees. And figure 4 showing the relationship between number of signees and national meat supply per person per year, i.e. consumption. And again, there seems to be a relationship there. And figure 5, relationship between number of signees and national beef exports. So perhaps a slightly less clear relationship, but again, you can see like countries like Australia, Brazil, and USA being quite highly represented, and they have high degrees of exports. So I think this kind of data together shows that these are particularly people from specifically significant meat cultures that are signing this declaration. And then in the journal article, my colleague Romain Espinosa created this incredibly useful chart to track some of the relationships, not only between the Dublin Declaration itself, but some of the other events. So if you look at in the black parts, you've got the Dublin Declaration itself, then you've got the Dublin Summit, which was the meeting that took place in Dublin, organized by Chagas, which is the Irish Agricultural and Food Development Authority. And then you've got the Animal Frontier Special Issue, you've got the Nature Food Correspondence, and in the 6 initials in the center are the key authors of the Dublin Declaration. And then you've got, if you look at the red, not the solid red, but the pink, the animal production industry, if you look at the legend, all the ones from the animal production industry around the top and the side and the bottom, you can see the links being made there between all the different actors involved in the Dublin Declaration and its associated publications and events. So we feel that this adds to analysis. There was some important exposure done by Greenpeace, published by The Guardian, which preceded our publication, but I feel that we add to the analysis that's gone on. And also I should give some credit to a Dublin politician called Niasa Hourigan, who's TD, and she raised her concerns over the Dublin Declaration within the Irish Dáil. Yeah. Okay, so this is reproduced in the both in the journal article and in the book chapter, actually. But credit goes to Romain Espinosa for creating this. And we also looked in the journal article, we looked at practices of self-citation in regarding the Animal Frontiers special issue, and we found an unusually high degree of self-citation, which I think tallies with my point earlier that it's basically ignored a whole wider evidence base around especially around the environmental dimensions of the meat industry. So they've essentially done a lot of self-citation. Okay. Two of the main instigators of the Dublin Declaration are worth mentioning specifically. Frederick Leroy, who's a Swiss meat scientist / meat advocate. He's very active in vegan denigration on social media. He also has an unpaid role with the United Nations FAO and runs this blog on called Aleph 2020, which is, I guess, he sees it as debunking arguments against animal source food consumption. And he proudly tweeted this chart on his Twitter to say that he had become the second highest influencer tweeting about plant-based diets in the first quarter of 2023, second only to Michael Greger, who, as you will know, is an advocate of whole food plant-based diets and a nutritionist. So that just shows the extent to which he's not just involved in promoting meat, but trying to denigrate plant-based diets. And his friend, Leroy Ederer, was another one of those 6 people in the initials in the aforementioned chart. And he's an economist, a consultant to agribusiness, involved in the World Farmers Organization, founded something called the Global Food and Agribusiness Network, a research company founded to serve the agribusiness sector, and the Global Observatory on Accurate Livestock Sciences, which is essentially a lobbying organization. He's been profiled by the PR debunking website dsmog.com, who point out that he has worked with Brazil-based JBS, the world's largest meat processor, and presented at industry events and panels alongside representatives from the company. And he also downplays the role of animal agriculture in climate change as well. Okay. We also see what I'm calling a broader context of backlash and lobbying around the Dublin Declaration. So animal source food corporations in countries with large animal source food exports have lobbied both FAO and the IPCC, and of course COP as well. They were present in the recent COP meeting in Azerbaijan. Frederick Leroy also played a significant role in the 2019 online campaign against the Eat Lancet recommendations, which used the hashtag #YesToMeat, which was a counter campaign against Eat Lancet recommendations. If you've never heard of Eat Lancet, check it out. It was a particular attempt to come up with a more sustainable diet based on a reduced amount of ASF, animal source food consumption. And he spearheaded a backlash against it. So yeah, he also has a role with the FAO. In 2013, the FAO LEAP, which is its public-private partnership, was chaired by Frank Mitloehner, who's quite notorious. He's also a signatory of the Dublin Declaration. He's a US-based meat scientist, or yeah, I think that's an accurate description. And he was also himself subject of a critical peer-reviewed article earlier this year by Morris and Jackie, and you can see that bottom right-hand side, that's their article there from February, The Animal Agricultural Industry, US Universities and the Obstruction of Climate Understanding and Policy. Check that one out, it's really good. In 2023, FAO were exposed as having played down the role of animal source foods in the climate crisis since the publication of its own Livestock's Long Shadow in 2006. And if you want to know all about my critique of the FAO in this regard, it's in my book, Climate Crisis and Other Animals, specifically in chapter 4 of that. I've also noted more recently that a UK Dublin Declaration signatory has also been trying to influence the UK nutrition dietary bodies, such as the British Nutrition Foundation and the British Dietetic Association too, in terms of giving talks to them and downplaying the role of ASFs in the climate crisis. Okay. So how do we push back the pushback? I think it's important to expose the ideological and profit-driven corruption of science taking place here, and to argue that anthropocentrism is not a sustainable or indeed a scientific ideology, and science for profit rather than for health and sustainability is not trustworthy. I would also make the point that ethical arguments are also evidence-based arguments, because they are made based on the evidence of knowledge and science around questions of animal consciousness, questions of animal sentience, which suggest human-animal similarity. And again, this is a knowledge base that's been developing a lot in the last few decades, which contests human-animal dualism. And we need to affirm the scientific consensus that has emerged around plant-based diets and ecological public health, and share that knowledge with the institutions we are trying to change. Okay, so whatever that may be, whatever those institutions might be they universities or whatever they might be, you know, any sort of social institution really that deals with, which is relevant for food provision and other things too. Okay, so as I said, I would finish the presentation by talking about what an alternative Dublin Declaration might look like. And I've already sort of mentioned some sources of evidence that would be cited for this. But the first kind of element of that alternative declaration would want to state that plant-based and plant-rich diets better support policies for ecological public health. So there's a good win-win when it comes to improving healthiness and improving, or rather reducing, the environmental impact of the food system, both in terms of the climate crisis, but also with the overlapping biodiversity/nature crisis too. And there is vast untapped potential to improve the health and flourishing of human populations through diverse kinds of whole food plant-based diets. So that's an unashamedly human-centered argument, but I think it rings true. You know, you could actually save so much money with in terms of, say, in the UK context, you could save the NHS a lot of money by through preventative action around dietary change, because there is such a strong link between diet, illness, and premature death. A plant-based food system can have the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, improved even further when combined with policies for localization and against food waste. All those articles that I was talking about earlier already found that a plant-based diet has the lowest greenhouse gas emissions, but didn't even factor in the ways in which that could be improved further through things like localization and against food waste. A plant-based food system also has the best profile for wildlife and biodiversity recovery, because we're all very aware of the land use, the profligate land use demands of animal agriculture. And just to give an example from Ireland, over 90% of agricultural land in Ireland is used for animal agriculture. And there's been a reduction over the years of vegetable production in Ireland, which I think, you know, it's Ireland is another one of these cultures, which is specifically very meaty meat culture. Alternatively, vegan values and practices properly respect the sentience of other animals and can also help create more peaceful and less violent societies as well. So again, I think that's a direct pro-animal point, but it's also a human-centered point at the same time as well, because vegan values are broad. They're not just about human-animal relations. There are also a critique of violence more generally. Okay, so on that point, I will finish. And thank you for listening. And let's please connect on social media. And by all means, choose Blue Sky over Twitter. Thank you.